play the clip from PragerU, since we were talking about how the Jewish faith is not the same today as it was in the time of Christ. So we'll link it back to that. There's a clip from Jordan Peterson's Exodus series that he released on his channel the other day, and I listened to 3 minutes of it. And Dennis Prager starts discussing the teaching that Catholics have on when Jesus says, if you even look at a woman with lust, you've committed adultery in your heart. So when he says this, just hear what he says, and then we'll get into it.
Okay, ready?
Yeah.
I'm less interested in the interior person, morally speaking, than you are. And probably any of you are. And it's largely, I do believe, because I come from a behaviorist, law-based religion. We care how you act. That's why we don't have a claim that if you look at another woman with lust, it's as if you've committed adultery with her. I am, as I said yesterday, I thank God for America's Christians. And Maimonides said, if it weren't for Christians, the world wouldn't know about the Torah. So
if it wasn't for American Christians, there'd be no state of Israel.
I'm a big Christian fan, but obviously
True.
Christianity and Judaism are not identical
I'm a big
religions.
Christian fan.
And we have no equivalent that if you look upon another woman with lust, it's as if you have committed adultery with your heart. There's only one way to commit adultery in Judaism, and it's with a different organ.
Gee, I wonder why that's why some certain people created pornography.
Okay.
And I'm not being
Wait, keep it paused.
cute. I'm
he
being
does-
very real.
He does get into that. I'm sorry. I kind of remember a commandment that says, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife.
Yeah, what
Now-
do they think covet means?
Now,
that is
there's
kind of a thing too. You got to kind of
There's a
think about that.
Yeah, there's a commandment that says, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife. Now, what do you think that means? Covet thy neighbor's wife? What, just steal her? No, it means long or lustful. You can lust for material things. That's why there's also a commandment, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods, right? Like, for him to say that Jews don't have any kind of equivalent, because what Jesus was doing on the Sermon on the Mount was not trying to just moralize. He was trying to show you what the heart of the law always was. That everything Jesus said was already said in the Old Testament. He comes in and says it in a new way to really make you see, because they were going by the letter of the law and not the heart of the law. And thou shalt not covet thy...
Specifically, the Pharisees were. Like
Yeah.
People have to realize the Jewish religion today is the religion of the Pharisees.
Yes.
Not of
That's
all
what-
the Jews at the time of Jesus.
Correct.
What were the
people-
other religions in Judaism? Sorry, Anthony.
No, dude, you can always cut me off because I talk over people all the time and I don't mean to. I just have such a loud mouth. I'm so sorry if I talk over you. What did you actually say there? I cut you off.
I was like, is there different denominations in Judaism, in the religion, basically,
Yeah,
before the fall of the temple?
They wouldn't call them denominations though, but there were different
Schools,
streams,
different sects.
different schools and different sects, different rabbinic teachers and things. So you have the Sadducees, you have the Pharisees. The Sadducees don't believe in the resurrection, right? So
They're honestly mostly atheist, even at that time.
the Sadducees come to Jesus and they try to trick him. And what do? They come over and they say, well, okay, well, if there's really a resurrection of the dead, then so the Jews had a rule where if a husband and wife are married and the husband dies without any children, the wife had to then marry the next brother in line. And now, so they tell him, okay, so he marries this man, they have no children, she marries the next one. They have no children, he dies, she marries the next one. They give him a list of 4 guys that she marries, none of them have children. Whose wife is she in the resurrection? And Jesus says, there is no, none of you have this right because there is no marriage in the resurrection. Now, the reason there's no marriage in the resurrection is because there's no procreation in the resurrection, right? And what's the point of marriage? Is procreation. And he also gives them the line of God is not the line, God is the God of the living, not the dead. So he shows them that, if he's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, God is the God of the living, not the God of the dead. And he uses their script. Anytime they try to trick Jesus, he flips it on their head and because they're always trying to catch him in something and he always flips it on their head. But the point is, there is no marriage in the resurrection because we don't procreate anymore. All of the souls that will be already exist, and that's why you will be your wife's brother in Christ instead of her spouse,
Right.
Yeah.
And also because the secondary object of marriage is unitive. Well, at the resurrection, we'll all be united in the beatific vision. So,
and we'll be the bride of Christ in that
Yeah.
fashion. So, okay, now this comment is, I'm glad. So look, Judeo-Christian is how they try to stake a claim on the fruits of Christ. We're going to get into that because the term Judeo-Christian drives me crazy because it is not Judeo-Christian. This is why you can't use that term, because
when you say the term Christian, it assumes Judaic roots,
Judaism.
regardless.
Absolutely. So
I have no idea what that even means. Yeah, I've heard it a lot. I don't know what it means at all.
It means the Jewish Christian moral law, right? So it's like the Judeo-Christian foundation. So you're going through the Old Testament and the New Testament is what they're implying with that statement. But just by saying Christian, you already have the Old Testament. But the idea that the Judeo end of that has anything to do with the morality is absurd, because if you see who it is,
as far as Jews today.
Yeah, modern Jews, correct. Yeah. All right, let's go. Let's finish out this clip and let's see what else he says.
Realistic. Looking with lust is not a sin in Judaism.
What's the stance on pornography?
So pornography, when I'm asked this question,
just to put you on the spot.
You did indeed. Okay, so my answer, when it's raised on my radio show, I have a male-female hour, and I'm very open about sexual subjects. I always ask, if a wife calls me and says, my husband looks at pornography, I found on his computer, I have one question. How is your life of intimacy with your husband? Is it good? In other words, is the pornography in lieu of you or in addition to you?
Mm-hmm.
And I know this is not a religious answer, and I'm not even giving a religious answer. I'm giving what I think is a moral and realistic answer. Men want variety. And if adultery is a substitute for, if pornography is a substitute for.
Notice how his mind even makes that connection, even though he doesn't want it to.
I think he's trying to justify his own behavior.
Well, I'm just saying, like, instead of the word pornography, his mind jumped to adultery. And he had to correct.
Oh yeah, it was a Freudian slip. 100%
sure.
a Freudian slip there. He accidentally said adultery because I actually when I first heard that clip, Rob, I meant to actually bring that up. I'm glad that you did, because I missed it the second time around. But when I heard it the first time, I was like, what a Freudian slip he just made there.
Or one's wife, it's awful. If it's a substitute for adultery, it's not awful. That is my unpredictable answer.
There is a clinical rule of thumb that's akin to that, I would say, if you're trying to.
What's with Jordan Peterson's suit?
So that suit, when he wore that suit on Joe Rogan, and he said somebody made it custom for him, and it's supposed to signify the divide in the human heart between good and evil, whatever that means. You know, Jordan's kind of
wear a normal suit.
You can actually get rid of it, because I think everything else from here is kind of nonsense anyway. But
I like the suit. Rob looks good.
He's very unique. I'll give him that. But the thing with pornography is this. First off, it's if you hear priests ever talk, they say the sin they hear the most in the confessional is confession of that, which is twofold to look at that. It's one, at least men are recognizing that this is something I need to root out of my life, and they're confessing it, right? But the other is that there comes a point of lukewarm Catholicism where the confessional becomes like a revolving door, where you're just confessing the same thing over and over, and it's like you're not making any progress in the spiritual life if you're continuously doing that, right? Like the spiritual life begins when mortal sin is rooted out. Like that's the beginning of the spiritual life. And the thing is, when I remember when I was struggling with it, and I'm not saying it's always going to be a lifelong struggle. It doesn't mean I'm falling. It's always something you're conscious of as a man. But I remember when I was struggling with that, and it was that scenario of the revolving door, it was like, that was the only sin I thought I was committing. It's like, it's this giant thing hovering in your life that it's like every time you fall, you think that's the only sin in your life. And when you do root that out as a man, all of a sudden you start seeing,
you see everything else that's been hiding underneath it.
Oh yeah. And it's true. It's like you start seeing all the times that you're dealing with the 7 deadly sins, especially, right? So especially envy. You don't realize how often you deal with envy and anger towards other people because they got something you didn't, and little things like that really are the 7 deadly sins, because they tear your soul apart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. I think one of the things I would say when it comes to, because I remember it, even Dr. Taylor Marshall, he says pale gas. That's a great way to remember it. One of the things I've always struggled with is envy when it came to like certain things that I saw some of my teammates have. Take it back to the sports realm again. I've always I would be working just as hard as anybody else. I'd be just as talented, but I see their fruits just be blessed with fruits and just of their labor and everything. And I'm just still sitting there like, man, when is my time coming, you know? And then it's like, you can't
I'll
help
say,
but slip into it.
even with this, I should have actually said that, because I don't want to come off like I'm judging anybody that's going through that
Oh, no,
revolving door.
I didn't take it like that.
Yeah,
You
the
good.
revolving door thing. I mean, I think every guy is going to go through this phase. It's like, but it's the beginning of recognizing that, yes, okay, this is a problem. Now, the other thing is, sometimes when you think you have something conquered, and what happens is, as soon as you get rid of the sins of the flesh, the sins of the spirit start popping up, and you start getting prideful, and right away you switch from going to being the prodigal son to the older brother in that story. And sometimes God will allow you to fall with an old sin to remind you how weak you are, and that you're only held up by his grace through that. So look, if there's guys that are still struggling with this and still dealing, like, it's going to be a lifelong struggle no matter what, but keep going through that revolving door, because the only way you'll ever root it out is by the sacrament. The sacrament and the rosary are the two key ways to get rid of that affliction that so many people deal with. He was literally blaming the wife. And he's like, well, how is your intimacy with your husband?
Yeah, blaming the women.
Variety. Men want variety. It's like, you're telling me in the Jewish faith, they don't put any kind of standard on men for them to strive for? That there's not even that he wouldn't, like, if a Jewish man's wife caught him looking at that, she has no right to be upset about it. Like, that's crazy. I mean, if my wife was looking at that crap, I would feel like she committed adultery. Right?
I agree.
It's one of those things where we try to make it like this is just something men struggle with. Plenty of women struggle with this. Now, if my wife was looking at that crap while I'm at work and I found out about it, I'd be heartbroken. Like, wait, what do you mean? Like, I'm not enough for you? Like, I don't get it. That's like, how could a woman not feel like her world is caving in on her from something like that?
I totally get it. I think another thing is for some reason, when he said that, it kind of, first thing that clicked in my mind was, oh, that sounds like Islam. You need multiple women in your life. If they're not satisfying you. And I don't know what kind of laws his religion goes through. I'm assuming it's Judaism. It's all the same for everyone in that religion. But for the most part, I mean, it's almost like Islam and Judaism, they kind of have this, women are a second tier. They're a second tier citizen. You're not only the leader of the household, which, okay, understandable, but you're below me. That's how they kind of put women in a sense.
It's 100%. It's 100% accurate.
And to go even further with that, Protestants do the same thing too.
You think so?
Yeah.
The Mormons do that for sure, don't they?
Maybe not as much, but there are strains of Protestantism that definitely, I mean, without reverence for the Blessed Virgin, that's what it leads to, right?
Yeah, we actually talked about this on the last show, right? It's like Mary, the cult of Mary, and men seeing Mary as the crown of Christ's creation is what made men start to elevate women to hold the door open for them and to put their coat on them when they're cold, and the whole chivalry movement all spawned from the devotion to the Blessed Mother.
Because I mean, Catholics and the Orthodox are the only, like, we recognize that the greatest creature that has ever been created in the history of creation was a woman. A woman.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And it's like, why do we have women veil at Mass? We have women veil at mass not because they're attractive, it's because they're holy, and we veil things that are holy, and women are holy.
Because their womb is a tabernacle.
Yeah.
And we veil the tabernacle.
So Baptists, what's IFB, Rob?
Independent, fundamental
Baptist. Okay.
Yeah.
Most definitely. Women are legitimately a second-class citizen only for baby making and housekeeping. Why? They're supposed to be more than that?
What?
Are they more than that?
Oh. We were doing so well.
We are canceled now. Yeah. I was trying to hold my tongue, but Anthony got us canceled already. That's 2 strikes for YouTube. I'm not gonna lie.
We won't make a clip out of that one.
Hey,